My name is Maren Holloway, and I am 34 years old. On the night of my wedding, my stepmother stood up in front of 212 people and replaced my mother's photograph in the slideshow with one of her own. She did it smiling. She did it the way you'd straighten a crooked picture frame in a stranger's house, like she was fixing something the rest of us had been too polite to mention. The room laughed, not all of it, but enough of it. Enough that my husband's hand tightened on mine under the table, and enough that my father, who had loved my mother for 26 years before she ever wore a different name, stared straight down at his salad and did not look up. Vivian Crane had been my stepmother for 11 years. She had spent every one of them telling people that my mother died in a car accident in Colorado in the spring of 2014. She had told it at country club luncheons. She had told it at my college graduation. She had told it to my husband Elias the first time she met him, in the quiet voice she used when she wanted to be believed. There was only one problem with that story. My mother was sitting 4 tables back, in the second row from the bar, in a soft gray dress my Aunt Bet had bought her that morning. She was holding a glass of water with both hands. She had been alive every single day of those 11 years. She had been alive while Vivienne replaced her photograph. She had been alive while the room laughed. And what I did next, what my mother did next, what Bet did next, what 11 years of quiet evidence in a locked filing cabinet in my office did next, they didn't expect. You're listening to Hidden Family Revenge. Subscribe if you've ever sat at a table where someone tried to write you out of your own life. Because tonight's story isn't about a wedding. It's about a forensic accountant who spent 9 years quietly auditing her own father's grief, and the woman who thought she'd buried the only witness who could end her. She hadn't. She'd only buried the photograph. I should tell you something about my mother before I tell you anything else. Because if you don't understand her, you won't understand why this story matters. June Holloway was a kindergarten art teacher in Cedar Falls, Ohio for 22 years. She had thin wrists and a habit of humming under her breath while she worked. She painted small ceramic birds in the evenings, little blue ones mostly, with white speckles on the breast, and gave them as gifts to neighbors who'd had hard weeks. She wasn't a dramatic woman. She wasn't an angry woman. She was the kind of woman who set 5 plates at dinner, even when one of us was away, because, in her words, you should always cook for the people you love, whether or not they show up. There's one of her birds on my kitchen windowsill right now. I'm looking at it as I tell you this. Her thumbprint is still pressed into the clay at the base. She didn't sand it out. She said the print was the signature. When I was 23 years old, my mother disappeared from my life. Not died. Disappeared. There's a difference. And I'm only just now learning how big that difference is. She and my father separated in the fall of 2014. I was finishing my master's in accounting in Columbus. I came home for Thanksgiving, and she wasn't there. My father said she'd gone to stay with her sister Bet for a while. He said she needed time. He said, "Please don't push her, Maren. She needs space." He said it the way men say things when they're reading from a script someone else wrote. By Christmas, my father had a new friend. By Easter, the friend had a name. By the next Thanksgiving, the friend was Vivienne. And Vivienne was telling people, in that soft voice of hers, that I had lost my mother in a tragic accident in Colorado. She said it like she was carrying it for me, like she was being brave on my behalf. And here is the part I have to tell you honestly, because I promised myself I would. I let her. I was 24 years old, drowning in a CPA exam I'd already failed twice, paying off student loans on an associate's salary. And the easier story, the one where my mother was simply gone, where I didn't have to ask my father any of the questions I should have asked, was the story I chose. I told myself my mother had walked away. I told myself she didn't want to be found. Aunt Bet sent me a birthday card every year, every single year, signed from your aunt and your mother. And I told myself that was grief talking. Bet and my mother had been close. People say strange things when they're hurting. I want to stop here for a moment, because I know how this sounds. I know you're listening and thinking, how does a grown woman not know her own mother is alive? And the answer is uglier than you think. The answer is that I did not want to know. The answer is that for 11 years, I built a little wooden box in my chest, and I put every uncomfortable question inside it, and I sat on the lid. I am a forensic accountant. My entire job is finding the money people hid because they didn't want it found. and I could not bring myself to audit my own father's silence. There were warning signs. 3 of them I remember clearly. The first was that Vivienne never, in 11 years, took me to my mother's grave. She always said the cemetery was a long drive, the weather was bad, the anniversary was too painful for my father. There was always a reason. The second was that my father's hands shook every time I mentioned my mother's name, not from grief, from something else. Something that looked, in hindsight, like a man bracing for a question he didn't want asked. The third was Vivienne's handwriting. She'd labeled my college moving boxes once, in 2013, when she and my father were still dating. Careful capitals, slightly slanted, perfectly even. I'd thought, at the time, that this is what it looks like when someone tries. I'd thought maybe this is what a mother does. Years later, I would see that handwriting again, on a letter I was never supposed to find, and the world would tilt sideways. I just wanted, for 11 years, to believe my father had loved my mother. I just wanted to believe the man who taught me to balance a checkbook at the kitchen table was not the kind of man who could quietly let a woman be erased. I just wanted that. It cost me almost everything. Saturday, September the 14th. 1:45 in the afternoon, ceremony at 3. The banquet hall was on the eastern edge of Cedar Falls. An old converted grain mill with high windows and exposed brick, and a slate floor that had been polished so many times it gave back the lights like water. Elias and I had chosen it because of the windows. We wanted afternoon light. We wanted the kind of light a photograph could not fake. I remember what I was wearing under my dress because it matters. A small enamel pin Elias had given me the night before, fixed inside the bodice at the seam, pressed against the left side of my ribs, a robin. Blue and white. He'd found it in an antique shop in Yellow Springs without knowing about my mother's ceramic birds. He'd just thought of me. The pin pressed to my skin every time I breathed, and I was grateful for it, because the room was full of people I did not entirely know, and I needed something to count. I count when I'm nervous. It's a habit from my work. Numbers don't lie, and they don't ask anything of you. 6 bridesmaids, 212 guests, 1 father walking me down, 1 stepmother, 3 rows from the aisle on the right, in cream, which is what you wear when you want to be photographed and remembered. The ceremony went the way ceremonies go. I won't waste your time on the vows. You're not here for the vows. You're here for what came after. The reception was in the same hall, transformed. They'd cleared the chairs, brought in the long tables, set up a small stage at the far end where the band would play. At the head of the room, behind the head table, they had set up a projector screen for the slideshow. It was Elias's idea. He wanted me to be able to show my mother to his side of the family. He had never met her. He believed, as I had told him, that she had died 11 years ago. He wanted, in his words, for her to be in the room. I had spent 3 weeks building that slideshow. 48 photographs. Childhood pictures, the ones from before. My mother teaching me to ride a bike in the driveway of the old house on Linden Street. My mother in her classroom, paint on her elbow, a 5-year-old's hand in hers. My mother at my college graduation, before the spring she vanished. The last photograph in the sequence was a portrait my father had taken of her in the kitchen, in 2013, holding one of her blue ceramic birds in her open palm. I'd chosen it because she was laughing. I had not seen my mother laugh in over a decade. I wanted my husband to see what she sounded like. The USB was in my maid of honor's clutch. I had labeled it Marin Wedding Slideshow Final, in black marker, the way I label everything in my office. I'd handed it to Glenn Marsh, the wedding planner, at 1:15. He'd nodded and said it would play right after the first dance. The first dance came. Elias and I moved across the slate floor under the windows. The light was exactly what we'd paid for. I remember thinking for 1 whole minute that the day was working. That I had done this. That I had built something my mother would have been proud of. The dance ended. The lights dimmed. Glenn stepped to the microphone and said, in his careful planner voice, that the bride had prepared a tribute. The screen lit up. The first photograph that filled the wall was not the photograph of my mother teaching me to ride a bicycle. It was a photograph of Vivienne Crane, in a turquoise dress, holding me at my college graduation, her arm around my waist. My face turned toward her in a way I did not remember, smiling. I felt Elias's hand find mine. The next photograph was Vivienne and my father at their wedding in 2015. Then Vivienne and my father on a beach somewhere. Then Vivienne in a kitchen I had never been in, with her arms around me from behind, and I could not, for the life of me, place when that picture had been taken. 48 photographs. None of them my mother, every one of them Vivienne. The hall began to clap. I want you to understand what I mean by that. I don't mean a polite clap. I mean Vivienne stood up at her table, both hands pressed to her chest, eyes shining, and she turned in a slow half circle to accept the applause like she had been given an award. She mouthed thank you to people I didn't know. Her daughter Sloane was filming her on a phone, and my father was looking down at his salad. Glenn Marsh caught my eye from the side of the room. His face was white. He held up a small black USB stick between two fingers. He mouthed, "That wasn't yours." The last photograph froze on the screen. Vivienne, alone. The portrait she used on her Kite Club Christmas cards. Soft focus, hand on her chin, the word mother typed beneath it in cursive. The room was still clapping. I stood up. Every part of me wanted to walk to that screen and tear it down with my hands. I wanted to find my father's eyes and ask him, in front of 212 people, what year he had decided I did not have a mother. I wanted to find Vivienne's microphone and break it. I didn't. I walked, in my mother's pearl earrings, to the small bar at the side of the hall, and I asked the bartender for a glass of water. I drank it slowly. I counted backward from 20. The robin pin pressed against my ribs every time I breathed. And while I was counting, my Aunt Bet, who I had not invited, who I had not seen in 9 years, who I had told myself was estranged from this family, stood up at table 14 in the back of the room. She walked toward me. She didn't hurry. She walked the way June Holloway used to walk down the aisles of her classroom, like she had all the time in the world and somebody was about to get found out. When she reached me, she put her hand on my elbow and she said one sentence, very softly, into the side of my hair. "That woman is not your mother. And your mother is sitting 4 tables back watching this happen because I asked her to come. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I counted very slowly to 10. And then I turned around. I want to tell you what it is like to see your dead mother across a room. It is not what you imagine. There's no swell of music. There's no slow motion run. What there is instead is a kind of administrative confusion. Your brain becomes a small clerk going through a filing cabinet very quickly, looking for the document marked "This is impossible," and failing to find it because the woman is right there. Her hands are folded around a glass of water. Her hair is grayer than you remember, and shorter, and she has the same way of tilting her head she always had when she was waiting to see if you'd recognize her. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just waited. I crossed the room toward her, in my own wedding dress, past tables of strangers from my husband's family, past my college roommate, past the small string quartet packing up their instruments. I walked the way you walk in dreams. I did not feel my legs. When I reached her, she said, "Marins, honey, sit down before you fall down." It was her voice. I had not heard it in 11 years, and it was her voice. The same softness, the same kindergarten patience. I sat down in the chair next to her, and the room dropped about 30 decibels. She said, "Bet told me what your stepmother was going to do. I came because I needed you to know I am alive. I did not come to ruin your wedding. I came to give you the choice your father took from you. If you want me to leave now, I will leave." I said, "Mom." It was the only word I could find. She put her hand over mine. "I will tell you something." I had forgotten what her hands felt like. I had built a memory of them. The way you build a memory of a song you haven't heard in years. Close, but missing the lower notes. The real hands were thinner than my memory. The knuckles were larger. There was a small scar on the side of her thumb I did not remember at all. She said, "I have 11 years of things to tell you. We do not have to do that tonight. Tonight you have a husband." And that was the part that almost broke me, not the betrayal, not the slideshow. The fact that my mother, 4 tables back at a wedding she'd been erased from, was still trying to protect my night. I stood up. I walked back across the room. I went directly to the small stage where Glenn Marsh was hissing into a headset. I asked him, in the calm voice I use with clients whose ex-husbands have hidden a Cayman account, whose US IVB had been played. Glenn swallowed. He said Vivienne had given him a second one at noon. She'd told him there had been a last-minute correction. She told him she was helping the bride. I asked him to keep the original. I asked him to put it in his desk drawer until Monday. I asked him not to mention to anyone that we had spoken. He did all 3. I went back to my husband. Elias was standing at the head table with both hands flat on the white linen, looking, for the first time since I had met him, like a man who wanted very much to break something. I told him quietly that the woman in the gray dress at table 14 was my mother. I told him that she was alive. I told him that I had not known until 8 minutes ago. I told him that we were not going to make a scene tonight. We were going to dance, and we were going to cut the cake, and we were going to thank his parents, and we were going to leave at exactly the time on the program. He looked at me for a long second. He said, "Whatever you need." I want to tell you about Elias for 1 minute because I have not told you yet, and he matters. Elias Brenner is a soft-spoken man who runs an architectural firm specializing in adaptive reuse, old buildings turned into new ones. He once spent a year restoring a 1920s creamery into a community library. He builds things that other people gave up on. When I told him on our second date that my mother had died in a car accident, he held my hand and said he was sorry, and he never asked me anything I didn't volunteer. That was the kind of man he was. What he was not, it turned out, was a man who would let a lie about his wife stand uncorrected for 1 minute longer than he was asked to. We danced. We cut the cake. We thanked his parents, who were confused and kind. Vivienne tried, 3 separate times, to corner me near the cake table, near the bar, near the photographer's setup. Each time, Elias appeared at my elbow with a calmness I had not known he possessed. Each time, Vivienne smiled and stepped back. She was, even in this, a woman who knew the optics. Once, just once, I caught my father's eye across the room. He looked away. We left at 9:45. Bet and my mother had already gone. Bet had handled it the way Bet handled everything. She had texted me a single line as we walked to the car. Sunday morning, my house, coffee at 10, Elias and I checked into the bridal suite at the hotel 2 blocks from the hall. We did not consummate the marriage that night. I want to be honest with you about that, because most stories like mine pretend the wedding night was magical. Ours was not. We sat on the edge of the bed in our wedding clothes, and Elias took both of my hands in his, and he said, "Tell me everything you can remember about her." I talked until 3 in the morning. I told him about the birds. I told him about the 5 plates at dinner. I told him about the year my mother taught me to count change at the kitchen table, sliding pennies as across the wood, asking how many do you have now, and now, and now. I told him about her humming. I told him about the smell of her classroom, paper and tempera paint, and the small wax of crayons that had been left out too long in the sun. The sun. Somewhere around 2, I said. I should have known. The cards, the cemetery, Dad's hands, I should have known. Elias said, "You were 23 years old. Your father told you a story. You did what kids do. You believed your father." I said, "I'm not a kid anymore." He said, "No, but your father is still your father. And it isn't a character flaw to love someone. It's a character flaw to lie to them." Different sides of that ledger. That was the moment I started to find my footing. He was using my language. Ledgers, sides. He knew I would understand the math better than the metaphor. I slept for 4 hours. I woke up at 7, made coffee in the hotel room, and opened my laptop. The robin pin was on the bedside table. The blue ceramic bird, I realized, was on my kitchen windowsill, 6 miles away, and had been there my entire adult life. I want to stop right here for a moment, because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, fine, but how? How does a man let his ex-wife be erased? How does a stepmother get away with telling people for 11 years that a living woman is dead? Drop the word how in the comments and if you want to know. Drop the word why if you want to know what Vivienne actually got out of it. Because what I found in the next 36 hours was uglier than I had let myself imagine. At 10 sharp on Sunday, I sat at Bet Lansing's kitchen table in a small, cedar-shingled house on the edge of town. My mother was there. Bet was there. There was a manila envelope on the table, 3 inches thick, that Bet had been quietly assembling since 2014. Bet is 66. She wears her hair in a gray braid down her back. She was a librarian for 41 years. She talks the way librarians talk, quietly, with an exact sense of where every fact is shelved. She said, "Marin, your mother did not leave your father. Your father asked her to leave." I said, "I know that." Mom said, "You don't know all of it." Bet said, "Your father asked her to leave so he could marry Vivienne Crane. Vivienne told your father in March of 2014 that she was pregnant. She wasn't. By the time your father had filed for separation, she had told him she'd miscarried. Your father by then had already moved out. Your mother by then had already moved here, to my house, because your father had told her in writing that he needed space. Your mother gave him space. She gave him 6 months of space. In November of 2014, your father served her with divorce papers and asked her in the same envelope to please not contact you because, in his words, you were under stress with the CPA exam and he wanted to manage the timing himself. My mother said very quietly, I should have come to you anyway. That is on me, Bet said. It is not on you, it is on him. I sat there with my coffee going cold, and I tried to do the math. The math was simple. I had been a few months from 24. My father had told me my mother was, quote, taking time. By Christmas, he had introduced Vivienne as a, quote, friend who's been helping me. By the next September, the friend was a fiancé. By April of 2015, they were married. At the wedding, Vivienne had cried during her vows about the family she had finally found. I had stood next to her in a periwinkle dress holding her bouquet. Bet opened the envelope. The first document was a marriage certificate, dated April the 2nd, 2015, Cedar Falls, Ohio. Warren Holloway and Vivienne Crane. The second was a divorce decree dated January the 9th, 2015. Warren Holloway and June Holloway. My mother had signed it. The signature was small and careful and tilted slightly to the left, the way she signed everything. The third document was a letter on Cedar Falls Country Club letterhead, dated June of 2015, signed by Vivienne Crane, formally notifying the club's social committee that her stepdaughter's biological mother had passed away the previous year and requesting sensitivity in any reference to family events. The fourth document, the one that took the air out of my chest, was a small note in Vivienne's careful slanted capitals. It was a thank you note. It was addressed to a doctor in Indianapolis. It thanked him for his discretion regarding her, quote, recent procedure. It was dated February of 2014. I looked at the handwriting. I had seen that handwriting before. On a moving box. In my dorm room, 11 years ago. I want to stop again. Because if you have ever found out that someone who wrapped your moving boxes with care was the same someone who orchestrated the quiet erasure of your mother, you know what the next sentence I am going to say is, I said, I'm going to be sick. I went to Bet's bathroom and I was sick. Bet stood outside the door and said nothing, the way Bet does. When I came out, she had a glass of water and a slice of toast on a plate, and she set it in front of me without comment. My mother said, Honey, you don't have to do anything with this. Not right now, I said. Mom, I'm a forensic accountant. She said, I know what you do, Marin. I said, I am going to do something with this. I have to, not because I'm angry. Because if I don't, I become her. Betty looked at me for a long time. She said, very slowly, Grandfather left you a trust. Did you know that? I said, Grandpa Cal left me a trust. Bet said, he left you a trust on the condition that you finish a graduate degree. You finished it in 2014. The trust was supposed to vest in October of that year. It was administered by your father. The administrator's report was filed in 2017. You should look at the report, Marin. Look at where the trust went. I looked at her. I said, where did it go? Bet said, Vivienne Crane's daughter, Sloan, for her wedding, in 2019, $68,000. Filed as an educational disbursement to a beneficiary your father claimed could not be located. I sat very still. I said, I want to see the report. Bet slid it across the table. I looked at the number. 68,000. I looked at the date. I looked at the signature, my father's. I looked at the line where the trust officer had asked, in 2017, where the beneficiary was. My father had written, in his rambling, careful hand, lost contact. He had not lost contact. I had been at his Christmas table that year. I had brought him a tie. I closed the report. I put my hand flat on the table. I counted very slowly to 20. The robin pin was upstairs in my luggage. I did not need it. I had everything I needed. I said, Mom, Aunt Bet, I'm going to ask you both a question, and I need you to answer me honestly. If I do what I think I have to do, if I take this to a probate judge, if I make my father answer for it, if I do not let Vivienne keep telling people you are dead, what do you need from me first? My mother thought for a long time. She looked at her hands. She said, I don't want revenge, Marin. I just want to stop being its ghost. Bet said, I want him to look at her. I want Warren to look at June. And I want her to be alive when he does it. Okay. I said, then that is what we will do. I'd like to tell you what a forensic accountant does in case you don't know. Because the next part will matter. When a marriage ends and one spouse has been quietly hiding money, through a shell company, through a friend's bank account, through fake business expenses, somebody has to find it. Somebody has to sit with 12 years of tax returns and bank statements and credit card receipts and reconcile what was reported against what was spent. and find the gap. That gap is usually where the truth lives. I'm good at that work. I've been good at it for 9 years. I once recovered $400,000 for a client whose husband had been routing income through a fishing charter business in Florida that did not own a boat. What I had never done in 9 years was audit my own father. I went home Sunday night. Elias was waiting. I told him everything Bet had shown me. He listened. He did not interrupt. When I was finished, he said, "Tell me what you need from me." And I said, "I need you to be patient. I'm going to take 3 weeks. I'm not going to call him. I'm not going to call her. I'm going to build the file." He said, "Build the file." I took the next 3 weeks off work. I told my partners it was an extended honeymoon. They sent us a fruit basket. I sat at my dining room table with the manila envelope from Bet, with 11 years of tax returns I'd pulled from my father's safe over the holidays, without ever quite knowing why I'd kept copies, with the trust documents Bet had given me, with the country club letter, with the doctor's note. The first week, I built a timeline, every event, every document, every signature. I cross-referenced the trust disbursement against my father's bank records for 2019. I found the wire transfer. I found the receiving account. I found Sloan Crane's name on the account. I found a memo line. The memo line says it, "Wedding gift, family." The second week, I drove to Indianapolis. I sat in the lobby of the doctor's office whose note Vivian had thanked. I did not go in. I just confirmed, with my own eyes, that the address was real. The doctor had retired in 2018. I obtained, through public records, a copy of the doctor's licensure history. He had specialized in obstetrics for 31 years. There had been no procedure in February of 2014 that involved the loss of a pregnancy. There had been a different kind of procedure. I will leave the rest of it private. What matters is that Vivian Crane had never been pregnant. She had told my father she was, and then she had told my father she had lost it. And the doctor's note had been the soft proof she'd shown him when he asked. The note never said what she'd implied. It said only that she had been treated and was recovering and was, quote, in good spirits. My father, in 2014, had not asked a single follow-up question. The third week, I went to see my grandfather's old attorney. Cal Holloway, my father's father, had been a quiet man who'd worked at the Cedar Falls Savings Bank for 47 years. He had set up my trust in 2009, when I was 19, in a moment Bet later told me he'd insisted on against my father's wishes. He'd died of a stroke in 2012. He had not lived to see the trust vest. The attorney was a man named Earl Whitcomb, in his early 70s, who'd been Cal's friend and golf partner for 30 years. He still kept Cal's file in a metal cabinet in his back office. I told Earl who I was. I told him what I had found. Earl Whitcomb looked at me for a long minute. Then he stood up, walked to his cabinet, and pulled out a thin file. He set it in front of me. He said, "Marin, I have been waiting for you to come into this office for 6 years." The file contained a letter. The letter was written by my grandfather, 6 months before he died. It was addressed to me. It was sealed. Earl had been instructed to hold it until I asked for it. My father had never told me it existed. I opened the letter at Earl's kitchen table the next morning. He'd had me come back so I could be in a quiet place. My grandfather had written, "Marin, I am leaving you $68,000 in a trust your father will administer. I love your father. He is my son. He is also, in my honest opinion, a coward in the way some men are cowards. Not violently, but conveniently. If anything ever happens to me and you find that this money has not reached you, find Earl, and please find Bet, and please find your mother. The three of them will tell you the truth. I am sorry, Marin. I should have raised your father to be a braver man." I read the letter 4 times. I cried for 10 minutes in Earl Whitcomb's kitchen while he made me a sandwich I did not eat. I cried because my grandfather had seen all of this coming. I cried because he had loved me enough to write it down. I cried because for 9 years I had a trust I did not know about, and a grandfather I had not understood, and a mother in a small cedar-shingled house on the edge of town. Then I stopped crying. I dried my face with a paper napkin. I asked Earl Whitcomb if he would be willing to provide a notarized affidavit confirming the existence and intent of the trust, the date of my grandfather's letter, and the chain of custody. He said I'd be honored to. I asked him if he could recommend a probate attorney. He said I am one, or I was. I retired 3 years ago. But I have not forgotten how. I want to tell you about the night before I made the call, because this is the part of the story I almost left out, and I think you need to hear it. It was a Tuesday. Late, I was alone in our kitchen because Elias was on a job site overnight in Cleveland. I had the manila envelope in front of me. I had the affidavit Earl had drafted. I had 3 weeks of forensic work in a neat file. I had everything I needed. I drafted a text to Vivienne. I drafted it on my phone, sitting at the kitchen island with the lights low. I wrote, Vivienne, I am sorry about the scene at the wedding. I should not have walked away from the head table. I know you were trying to honor me in your own way. I want to talk. I read it 3 times. I almost sent it. I want you to understand why. Not because I forgave her. I had not forgiven her. I would not forgive her. I almost sent it because 11 years of training in being the calm one, the easy one, the daughter who made the holidays smooth was sitting in my chest like a second heartbeat. 11 years of being the one who absorbed the discomfort so my father didn't have to. 11 years of apologizing for things I had not done. The text was muscle memory. The text was a woman who had spent her entire adult life smoothing other people's feelings, reaching for the iron one more time. I did not send it. I'll tell you why. I looked up. The kitchen lights were low, and the window over the sink was a soft black square. On the windowsill was the blue ceramic bird my mother had made, her thumbprint at the base. The white speckles on the breast, the little tilted head. I had lived in this house for 4 years. I had looked at that bird every single morning while I made coffee. I had told myself every single morning that it was the only thing I had left of her, that it was a memorial, that I kept it where I could see it, because I was a good daughter who remembered her dead mother. The bird had not been a memorial. The bird had been a witness. The bird had sat on my windowsill for 4 years while a living woman in a cedar-shingled house on the edge of town painted other birds for other people's neighbors and waited for her daughter to come find her. I deleted the text. I did not feel angry. I want to be honest with you about that. Anger came later, in waves, over the next year, in places I did not expect. At red lights, in the dairy aisle, in the middle of a Tuesday lunch meeting. The night I deleted the text, I felt something quieter. I felt clarity, the kind that does not arrive with a sound. The kind that arrives like a door that has been stuck for years finally clicking open. I went to bed. I slept for 9 hours. The next morning, a Wednesday, I made 3 phone calls. They were quiet, specific, professional. I had planned them on a yellow legal pad the night before. The first was to my father. He picked up on the second ring. He said, Marin, honey, I have been trying to reach you for 3 weeks. I said, Dad, I know what you did to Mom. There was a silence on the other end of the line that I will remember until I die. It was not the silence of a man pretending not to understand. It was the silence of a man who had been waiting 11 years for that exact sentence and had not in 11 years phrase prepared a response to it. He said, Marin? I said, I have a forensic file. I have the trust report. I have Earl Whitcomb's affidavit. I have Grandpa Cal's letter. I have the doctor's oaths note. I have the marriage certificate. I have the country club letter from Vivienne. I have the wire transfer to Sloan. I am not calling you to argue with you. I am calling you because I am inviting you exactly one time to meet me at Aunt Betta's house on Saturday at noon. Mom will be there. I would like you to look at her. I would like you to say what you have to say. After Saturday, the file goes where it needs to go. If you come, I will be the person handling this. If you do not come, the probate attorney will be. He said, Marin, your stepmother. I said, Dad, I am not asking you about my stepmother. I am asking you whether you will be at Aunt Bet's house on Saturday at noon. He said, Can I bring Vivienne? I said, No. He said, I'll be there. I hung up. I want to tell you something. After I hung up, my hand was completely steady. It surprised me. I had expected to shake. I did not shake. I had spent 3 weeks doing the kind of work I am best at, and I had built the kind of paper trail I would have built for a client, and I had taken the personal weight out of the room. The numbers don't lie. That is the only sentence my grandfather had ever taught me about money that mattered. The numbers don't lie. And when the numbers don't lie, you don't have to. The second phone call was to Sloan Crane. I'd thought about whether to make it for 2 days. Sloan was 31. She had been 20 when our parents married. I did not know how much she knew. I did not know if she was an accomplice or a beneficiary. I called her because I needed to know. She picked up. She said, Marin? Oh my God. I have been trying to figure out how to text you. I said, Sloan, I need to ask you one question. Did you know my mother was alive? There was a long, slow silence. She said, Marin. I'm so sorry. I said yes or no. She said yes. I have known since 2017. My mother told me. I should have told you. I have been the worst kind of coward, Marin. I have been a coward in your direction for 8 years. I said, thank you for not lying to me right now. She said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to do what is fair, including to you. Sloan, I am not going to come after you for the 68,000. I am going to come after my father because he was the trustee and the breach was his. But I want you to know that I know. And I want you to know that the next time my mother is mentioned in a room you are in, I expect you to be the person who says her name. She started crying. She said, okay, Marin, okay. I said, one more thing. Your mother is going to call you. Do not tell her about this conversation. Tell her, when she calls, exactly what you would have told her on any other day. I need her not to know what's coming. Sloan said, I understand. I hung up. The third phone call I did not make. The third phone call was to Vivienne. I did not make it because the third phone call was not going to be a phone call. The third phone call was going to be Saturday, at noon, at Aunt Bet's house, and Vivienne was not going to be there for it. I'd like to tell you the moment, in those 3 weeks, when I saw Vivienne be human. It was the second Sunday after the wedding. I had driven past my father's house, on my way home from a meeting. I do not know why, I had not planned to. The driveway curved past a low boxwood hedge, and there was a side window into Vivienne's kitchen, and the light was on. I stopped my car across the street. I sat there for 90 seconds. Vivienne was alone at the kitchen island. She was holding a photograph in both hands. From the angle, I could not be sure, but I am almost sure of what photograph it was. It was a photograph in a small, silver frame. The frame was facing her. She was looking down at it. She was not crying. She was not posing. There was no audience. She was just sitting on a stool in her kitchen, holding the picture, and she was, for the first time in my life, small. I think she had been looking at the picture of my mother that she had quietly removed from the wedding slideshow. I think she had kept it. I think she had not thrown it away. I think in some buried corner of the woman she pretended not to be. Vivienne Crane had known exactly what she had done and had not entirely succeeded in not knowing it. I drove away. I never told her I saw her. I never will. It did not change what I was going to do. But I want you to know that I saw it. Because the version of this story where Vivienne is a monster is the easier version, and it is also the dishonest one. Vivienne's a woman who could not bear, in any room she entered, to be the second choice. She had built her whole life on being chosen. And when my father chose her, in 2014, she could not survive the version of the story in which she had been chosen over a living woman. She needed June to be dead. She needed June to be dead the way some people need air. And she had built, brick by careful brick, a world in which June was dead, and she had labeled it in her slanted careful capitals, and she had lived inside it, and she had almost made it work. She had not counted on Bet, she had not counted on Cal, she had not counted on me. Saturday, noon. Bet Lansing's kitchen, in the cedar-shingled house on the edge of town. The kettle was on. The manila envelope, now 4 inches thick, was on the table. My mother sat in the chair by the window in a blue sweater. Bet sat at the head of the table. I sat opposite Bet. Earl Whitcomb sat next to me, because Earl had asked, very gently, whether I would like a witness, and I had said yes. My father knocked on the door at 12:04. Bet let him in. He looked older than I remembered, and he had only been 3 weeks older. He was wearing the gray cardigan my mother had given him in 2010 for Christmas. I don't think he realized he had put it on. He walked into the kitchen and he stopped when he saw my mother in the chair by the window. He did not say her name. He did not say anything for what felt like a full minute. My mother looked at him. She did not stand up, she just looked at him. Her hands were folded in her lap. She said very softly, "Hello, Warren." He sat down in the empty chair across from her. He put his hands flat on the table. He looked, for the first time in 11 years, exactly like what he was. A man who had told a lie so big and so long that the lie had become the only structural support of his life. And he had walked into a room where the lie was finally going to come down. I said, "Dad, I'm going to tell you what's in the file. I'm not going to interrupt myself, and you are not going to interrupt me. When I'm done, you can speak. Mom can speak. Bet can speak. Then we will decide together what happens next." He nodded. I opened the file. I went through it the way I would go through a deposition. I read out the dates. I read out the documents. I read out the trust report. I read out Grandpa Cal's letter in full, including the part about my father being, quote, a coward in the way some men are cowards. I did not change my voice. I did not editorialize. I did not look up. When I was done, I closed the file. I said, Dad, 2 questions. 1. Did you know, when you served Mom with the divorce, that Vivian had never been pregnant? 2. Did you know, when you signed the trust report in 2017, that you were diverting Grandpa Cal's gift to Sloane Crane? He did not answer either question. He said, Marin, I want you to understand. I said, yes or no, Dad. He looked at my mother. He said, yes, to both. My mother did not cry. I want you to know that. She had cried, I imagine, every cry she had to cry in 11 years in a cedar-shingled house on the edge of town. She just looked at him and she said, Warren, why? He said, June. I was so tired. I was so tired of being a good man. Vivian told me I didn't have to be. She told me I had earned a softer life. And I wanted to be told that. I wanted to be told that so much I forgot I had a wife. Bet said, and a daughter. He said, and a daughter. I want to tell you what my mother did next. Because it is the thing about her that I have carried into every room I have walked into since. She did not yell. She did not throw the kettle at him. She did not even raise her voice. She said, Warren, you let a woman tell the town I was dead. You let our daughter wear a periwinkle dress at your wedding to that woman, while I was alive in my sister's house 6 miles away. You took my father-in-law's gift to our child and gave it to her child. You did all of that, and you wore the sweater I gave you on Christmas. And you sat at this kitchen table just now without saying my name. He started to cry. She said, I am not going to ruin you, Warren. Marin will do what Marin needs to do with the file, and the trust, and the law. That is between her and the court. What I want from you is one thing. I want you to go home today. I want you to sit your wife down at her kitchen island. I want you to look at her, and I want you to say, out loud in your own voice, June's holiday is alive. I want you to say it 3 times. And I want you to know, while you are saying it, that she would have wanted this. That phrase Vivienne loves. She would have wanted this has never been a phrase I would have ever used about anyone. I would have wanted my husband. I would have wanted my daughter. I would have wanted my life. I did not want it for this. Vivienne wanted this. Say my name in her kitchen, Warren. And then come back to me on Monday, alone, without her, and we will talk. He nodded. He could not speak. Earl Whitcomb said very gently, Warren, there is also the matter of the trust. Marin and I have agreed she will not pursue criminal charges if you sign a restitution agreement. The principal, plus statutory interest, returned within 90 days. I have a draft with me. My father signed it without reading it. I would not have. In his place, I am his daughter, and I would not have. But he signed it. He left at 1:15. We learned later that he went home and did exactly what my mother had asked. He sat Vivian down at her kitchen island. He looked at her. He said 3 times, June Holloway is alive. Vivian did not cry. Vivian did not yell. Vivian, according to my father, simply stood up, walked to the bedroom, and shut the door. She did not come out for 2 days. The country club called my father on a Tuesday. The social committee chair had received an anonymous packet containing the 2015 letter from Vivienne about her stepdaughter's, quote, deceased mother, and a recent photograph of my mother taken at Betty's house the previous Sunday and a copy of the divorce decree. They wanted to know if there had been a mistake. My father told them there had been. They removed Vivienne from the committee within the week. The grocery store. The bakery. The Sunday service at the small Methodist church on Linden Street. Cedar Falls is not a big town. Word travels through it the way water travels through a river. Quietly, but everywhere. Vivian Crane, within 3 months, was no longer the woman the women at the junior league brought casseroles to. She stopped going to the country club. She stopped going to the bakery. She stopped going to church. She did not, as far as I know, lose any one big thing. She lost 100 small ones, and the small ones, in the end, are the ones that hold a person up. I want to tell you about Sloane, because the part of this story I am most proud of has Sloane in it. 3 weeks after that Saturday at Bet's, Sloane drove 4 hours from Pittsburgh to Bet's cedar-shingled house. She did not call ahead. She knocked on the door at 10 on a Sunday morning. She had a casserole and a card. The card was a thin, folded sheet of stationery in Sloane's handwriting. I read it later, with my mother's permission. It said, June, I have known you were alive since 2017. I have been a coward for 8 years. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am asking you to let me bring you dinner once a month, for as long as you will let me, for the rest of your life. I am not your daughter. I will not pretend to be. But you should not have been a ghost. And the people who let you be a ghost should have to spend the rest of our lives putting one plate on your table at a time." My mother read the card. She put it down. She said, "Sloan, come in. The casserole won't keep on the porch." That was all she said. Sloan has brought dinner to Bet's house every third Sunday for 14 months now. Vivienne does not know. The enabler in this story in the end was not Sloan. The enabler was my father. The enabler was the man in the gray cardigan at the kitchen table who had let a woman tell a town his ex-wife was dead because being told he didn't have to be a good man was the softest thing anyone had ever offered him, and he had been so very tired. The email came on a Thursday in November, about 2 months after Saturday at Bet's. It was from my father. It was 3 sentences long. It said, "Maren, I am not asking you to forgive me. I am not asking you to come to Thanksgiving. I was a coward, and I sat at tables where your mother's name should have been said, and I did not say it. I am sorry I read it 5 times. It did not fix anything. It mattered anyway. I want to tell you where things are now, because vague endings are a kind of lie, and I am done with lies. It has been 14 months since my wedding. The trust was restituted, $68,000 plus 4 years of statutory interest, returned to me in March. I did not keep it. I set it aside in a small account I opened in my mother's name. She did not want a windfall. She wanted, in her own words, to know it was there. She uses it, occasionally, to send Bet flowers on Bet's birthday, and to buy clay for her birds. Last month, she shipped 6 of them to a small gift shop in Yellow Springs that had asked to carry her work. They sold out in 9 days. My father lives in his house. Vivienne lives there too. They are still married. I do not know if they will remain married. I am told by people I do not seek out but who tell me anyway, that Vivienne is quieter now, that she no longer attends the events she once chaired, that she has, in the careful way of women who once cared a great deal about being seen, simply stopped being seen. I do not know what that costs her. I do not any more owe her the imagination required to find out. My father and I speak on the phone once a month. The conversations are short. He calls. He asks how I am. I answer. Ask how he is. He answers. We do not talk about my mother yet in those calls, because the agreement my mother and I have is that she gets to decide when and if that ever happens. She has not decided yet. She may never decide. Fine is her decision, and not Vivienne's, and not mine, and not my father's. After 11 years, that is in itself the closest thing to justice I think this family is going to get. Elias and I bought a small house on a quiet street about 10 minutes from Betta's. It has a porch. It has good morning light in the kitchen. There is a windowsill above the sink, and on the windowsill there are now 2 blue ceramic birds. The old one with my mother's thumbprint at the base, and a new one, smaller, that she painted for me last spring with a tiny white M on its breast where the speckles usually go. Beside the birds, in a small wooden frame, there is a photograph. It is from the sex Saturday in October, a month after the wedding. My mother is sitting at our kitchen table. Betta is next to her. Elias is making coffee in the background, out of focus. My mother is laughing. It is the first time my husband has heard my mother laugh. It sounds, he told me later, exactly the way I had described it. Every Sunday, my mother and Bet come for dinner. I set 4 plates, not 5, 4. The 5th plate, for years, was a habit I'd inherited from my mother without it understanding it. I understand it now. The 5th plate she once told me was for whoever needed it most. Some Sundays that turns out to be my father. Though he has not yet come to dinner, the plate is there if he ever does. The door is open 1 inch, not wide enough to walk through, but not locked. The condition is simple. My mother told me when I asked. She said, "Not 1 sentence, Maren, 10 years of behavior. I want to tell you what I learned. Not about Vivienne, not about my father. About myself. I used to think the calm one in the family was the strong one. I had been the calm one my whole life. I had absorbed every uncomfortable feeling in every room I had ever sat in, and I had told myself that was strength, and I had told myself that was love. It was neither. It was a kind of accounting fraud I had been running on myself for 34 years, booking other people's discomfort as my own asset, and never asking why my balance sheet was getting thinner every year. The calm one is not the strong one. The calm one is the one who has decided, very quietly, that her own peace is the cheapest thing to spend. I am not the calm one anymore. I am the daughter of June Holloway, who is a kindergarten art teacher who paints small blue birds for the people she loves, and who sat in the second row from the bar at my wedding in a gray dress because her sister Bet had asked her to come, and who waited 11 years for her daughter to find her without ever, once, asking her daughter to do the finding faster. The numbers don't lie. That is the only sentence my grandfather ever taught me about money. It is also, I have learned, the only sentence anyone ever needs to learn about families. The numbers don't lie. The 5 plates at dinner. The 11 years of birthday cards from your aunt and your mother. The trust report your father signed in a year you were eating Christmas dinner at his table. The slideshow at your wedding that was not the one you handed in. The numbers don't lie. The people around them do. If you are listening to this and you are the person in your family who has spent your whole adult life setting one less plate than you should, adjusting the photographs, smoothing the holidays, swallowing the small humiliations because making a scene would be unkind, I want to say one thing to you. Some people don't bury you out of cruelty. They bury you because they need to be the only one standing. And the ones who let it happen, the ones in the gray cardigans, the ones who say, please, can we just keep the peace? They are not innocent. They are just tired. And being tired is not the same thing as being right. And keeping the peace with someone who is burying you is just helping them dig. You are allowed to set the extra plate. You are allowed to invite the woman in the second row from the bar to come sit at it. You are allowed to take 11 years to do it, if 11 years is what it takes. And the people in your life who say she would have wanted this, about a wedding, about an inheritance, about a holiday, about anything, those people are almost always speaking, in the end, about themselves. The dead don't want things. The living want things. Find out which one you're really talking to. I want to ask you one question before I go. It's the question I have been thinking about for 14 months. The question I do not have a clean answer to. The question I would like to hear what you think about. If someone in your family had been quietly erasing another person from your life, a sibling, a parent, an aunt, anyone, and you found out tomorrow, would you want to know? Even if knowing changed everything. Even if knowing meant you had to look at your own 11 years of being the calm one. Even if knowing meant the first thing you'd have to do is forgive yourself. Tell me below. I will read every comment. And if you've ever sat in a periwinkle dress holding a bouquet for a wedding that should not have happened. This comment section tonight is for you. My name is Marin Holloway. My mother is alive. Thank you for listening.